He was worth more than most city blocks, but he sat in a harbor cafe and ordered the cheapest breakfast on the menu. Before we dive in, if you love cinematic stories with real emotions and unexpected twists, hit subscribe to Beyond Stories and stay with me until the end of this one. The waitress tapped the menu with her pen. "Dock worker special?" she asked. He nodded. 2 eggs, potatoes, black coffee. That one. The coat on his shoulders was thrift store wool, thinning at the elbows. The envelope of bills in his pocket felt heavier than any metal card he had ever held. No driver waited outside. No assistant hovered with a tablet. Just him, a cheap coat, and the smell of salt drifting in from the harbor. To everyone else inside Harbor Light Cafe, he was just another stranger trying to wake up. His name was Nathan Cole, founder of Cole Horizons, the company whose glass buildings line the Seattle waterfront. Shareholders called him a visionary. Magazine covers called him the architect of the new skyline. A few days earlier, he had stood in that tower at the head of a long table of executives. Outside the windows, the harbor looked distant and neat, boats reduced to small white marks on gray water. On the screen at the end of the room, a title glowed in cold blue letters, Harbor Vista, Phase 1. "Let's see it," Nathan said. His chief operating officer, Victor Lang, stepped forward with a remote. A street map of the waterfront appeared. When Victor clicked, a strip along the pier lit up in blue. "The East Pier Corridor," Victor began. "Row of one-story buildings, low rent, high maintenance. We replace it with a mixed-use development that matches the land value. Renderings flashed by, glass towers, clean sidewalks, a smooth boardwalk along the water. Tax revenue triples, lease income jumps," Victor said. "Harbor Vista becomes the story everyone tells about us." Nathan's eyes moved along the base of the map. Among the tiny labels naming the existing businesses, one little rectangle carried a name printed so small he had to squint. Harbor Light Cafe. Then the next slide hit the screen. Headlines and screenshots from local news filled the wall. In the center was an opinion column with a grainy night photo of Cole Horizons' tallest tower and a headline in bold, "The man in the glass tower doesn't see us." Nathan had read it at 2 a.m. and then pretended he had not. It described a man who approved closures from 70 floors up and never set foot in the places he erased. "It's getting traction," Victor said. "Council members are quoting it. Community groups are sharing it. They think we see blocks, not people, numbers, not lives. We create jobs and pay taxes. That's real," Nathan replied. "It is," Victor agreed. "But the story right now is that you live up here and have no idea what life looks like down there, in places like this cafe you're about to erase." "So we meet some residents," Nathan said. "We tour the site, shake hands, promise opportunity." "That reads as damage control now," Victor answered. "They don't want a photo. They want proof you've actually been in their world when no one asked you to show up." "So, what do you suggest?" Nathan asked. 10 days, Victor said. "You leave the tower. No driver, no company cards, no entourage, $400 in cash, a rented room near the docks, a basic phone. You eat where they eat. You sit where they sit. You listen to what they say about us when we're just a name on an envelope." Nathan stared at him. "You want me to play at being broke," he said. "I want you to see what your decisions feel like from the sidewalk," Victor replied. "You always say you don't run this place on feelings. Fine, call it field research. If you come back untouched, we build Harbor Vista as planned. If something shifts, better we know before the demolition crew shows up." Nathan turned toward the glass. From up here, the East Pier was a strip of gray and brown. Somewhere in that blur was a tiny box labeled Harbor Light Cafe. He tried to remember the last time he had paid for his own breakfast in cash at a place like that. Nothing came. "What are you afraid of?" Victor asked. "That you might not like what you see, or that you might?" Nathan's jaw tightened. 10 days, he said at last. $400. No one follows me. No one interferes. No press. No safety net. Victor nodded once. 10 days. You come back with whatever you come back with. "One condition," Nathan added. "If I decide Harbor Vista is a mistake, you will stand in front of everyone on that map and explain why we're changing course. Not a spokesperson. You." Victor hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded again. "If 10 days down there move you that far, I'll stand there." By sunset the next evening, Nathan walked out of Cole Horizons without a suit jacket, without a driver at the curb, without the little card that opened private elevators. In his pocket, an envelope of 40 worn bills and a folded printout of the pier map pressed against his palm. The crease ran straight through that tiny rectangle named Harbor Light Café. Now, in the present, the only glass around him was a fogged coffee pot behind the counter. His reflection in it was not a legend in a tailored suit, but a man in a tired coat waiting for a dock worker special. He did not know that the person who would slide that plate onto his table would end up forcing him to decide what his towers, his projects, and his billions were really for. By the second night, Nathan finally felt hunger as something other than a word in a report. 2 days earlier, he had walked out of Cole Horizons with a fake ID, an envelope of 40 $10 bills, and a promise to live like everyone else. Since then, the stack had thinned on stale bread, cheap fruit, and a cup of soup so watery he could see the bottom. Under the name Eli North, every small purchase felt louder than the million-dollar decisions he used to make in silence. He slept above a closed hardware store, in a room that smelled like dust and boiled cabbage. The mattress sagged, the heater rattled more than it warmed. At night, arguments, laughter, and footsteps pushed through the thin walls. In the tower, silence had been one of the things his money bought. Here, other people's lives arrived uninvited. By late afternoon now, his stomach ached in a slow, dull way. His head felt light, thoughts sliding instead of locking into place. He caught himself staring through restaurant windows at other people's plates, then looking away before they saw him. He drifted toward the docks, following the smell of salt and diesel. The streets narrowed, the air turned colder and wetter. Somewhere out on the water, a horn blew once, low and distant. That was when he saw it, a small neon lighthouse pulsing in the mist above a row of fogged-over windows. Harbor Light Café. Warm yellow light glowed behind the glass. He could hear the muffled clatter of dishes, a low hum of voices, a radio playing an old song under a layer of static. The place looked tired, but it also looked open. That was enough. He stopped on the sidewalk and pressed his fingers around the worn bills in his pocket. Automatically, his mind did what it always did. Math. Cash left. Days to go. How many meals if he kept choosing the bottom of every menu? Just go in, he told himself quietly. You're hungry, not delicate. He pulled the door open. A small bell jingled. Heat and smell rolled over him. Frying potatoes, bacon, coffee, cleaning solution. The Harbor Light was a long, narrow room. Blue vinyl booths lined one wall, the seats cracked and patched with tape. A chipped counter and a row of spinning stools faced the other. The floor tiles had lost their shine, but kept their scrubbed, stubborn look. Conversations dipped for a heartbeat as he stepped inside, then rose again. A few faces turned his way, took in the thrift store coat, the scuffed boots, the tired stubble, and decided he was not worth an extra glance. In his tower, rooms adjusted to him. Here, the room absorbed him and kept moving. He slid into an empty booth halfway down the line. The cushion gave a weary sigh. Torn vinyl scratched his sleeve. For a moment, he thought about the price of one of his office chairs and felt slightly ridiculous. A voice came from beside the table. Coffee? He looked up. The waitress wore a powder blue dress and a white apron. The fabric was faded but carefully clean. Her dark hair was pulled back into a low ponytail. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind that don't vanish after a single full night's sleep. Her name tag sat a little crooked on her chest. Riley. Her expression wasn't forced cheer, and it wasn't sharp. It was steady, professional, edged with tiredness. Whatever day she was having, she wasn't taking it out on the customers. He realized she was waiting. Yes, he said. His voice sounded rough from disuse. Coffee would be great. She nodded once, like that answer fit neatly into her world. Be right back, she said, and walked away. No second look, no quick scan from his shoes to his face, no visible question about whether he should really be there. She had seen a man in a booth who wanted coffee. That seemed to be enough. He watched her move through the cafe. Riley refilled a mug for an older man in a newsboy cap, dropped a plate at a pair of workers in reflective jackets, leaned down to hear an order from a woman with a stroller. She moved fast, but not frantically. the pace of someone who knew exactly how many tables it took to cover rent, school, medicine. She came back with a heavy brown mug and a glass pot. "Here you go," she said, pouring. The coffee was dark and strong, its smell sharp and bitter. She set the mug down and slid a laminated menu across the table. "Breakfast is on this side," she said, tapping it. "Lunch and the rest on the back. I'll give you a minute." He wrapped his hands around the mug as soon as she left. The ceramic burned his palms in a way that felt oddly welcome. Heat moved into his fingers, up his arms, into the knots in his shoulders. For a few breaths, he just held it and listened to the scrape of forks, the hiss from the grill, the faint rattle of the bell at the door. Then he opened the menu. It was as direct as a bill. No adjectives, no stories, no promises. Just dishes and prices in a font that had probably been chosen once and never discussed again. His eyes, trained by years of spreadsheets, slid down the right-hand column. Burgers, sandwiches, pancakes, omelets. His stomach voted for everything at once. His mind kept track anyway, dividing what he had left into what he still needed to survive the week. Near the bottom of the breakfast list, he saw it. Dock worker special. 2 eggs any style, hashed potatoes, toast, 4.25. The cheapest full plate on the page. Enough food to count as a meal. The name made him think of men coming off night shifts, hands raw from rope and cold metal. Riley came back, pen and order pad in hand. "Figure something out?" she asked. He kept his eyes on the menu for a second longer than he needed to. In his other life, he signed off on numbers that could have bought the whole block. Now he was hesitating over $4.25. "I'll have the dock worker special," he said finally. "Eggs sunny side up. Just that and the coffee." He waited without meaning to, braced for the tiny sign of irritation he knew from more expensive places. The glance toward the door, the tight smile, the sense that you were taking up space you hadn't paid for. Riley didn't change at all. "Dock worker, sunny, coffee," she repeated, writing it down. "Got it." No sigh. No suggestion that he should add bacon or upgrade anything. She treated his order like any other line on her pad. One more thing to make sure the cook saw. She tore off the slip, carried it to the pass, clipped it to the metal rail, called it out. And by the time Nathan looked up again, she was already asking someone at the counter if they wanted their toast dry or with butter. He let out a breath he hadn't noticed he was holding. He lifted the mug and took a sip. The coffee was strong and scorched around the edges, but it was hot and entirely real. It settled in the empty place in his stomach and spread outward. He glanced around the cafe. A couple shared a plate of pancakes, cutting them straight down the middle. A man in a city worker jacket scrolled through messages on a cracked phone. An older woman stirred sugar into her tea with slow, careful circles. No one was watching him. For the first time since he'd left the glass tower with a fake name and a stack of cash, he didn't feel like a headline or a walking balance sheet. He was just Eli, a hungry man in a worn coat, sitting in a cracked booth, being served by a tired waitress who had given him something he hadn't realized he missed. Not admiration, not fear, just simple, quiet respect. He had no idea yet how much that would matter, or how much the harbor light and the woman in the crooked name tag were about to change everything he thought he knew about his own company. Eli ate slowly, cutting his eggs into small pieces, trying to stretch the plate and the warmth that came with it. The dock worker special was simple, but it felt like the first real kindness his body had had in days. The bell over the door rang. "See, told you this place was perfect," a bright voice announced. "Cheap and charming. Clients eat that up." 2 men walked in. The one in front wore a light gray suit that caught the cafe lights, a shiny watch, and a grin that reached for every corner of the room. The man behind him held a tablet and moved like he was always a step behind. Gus looked up from the register. "Morning, Trent." "Gus," the suited man said. "You still saving my booth?" "Windows open," Gus replied, nodding toward the booth across from Eli. Trent Walker dropped into the seat facing the room. His colleague slid in opposite. Their arrival pulled a little more attention than the cafe usually allowed. Riley reached them with her order pad and coffee pot. "Good morning," she said. "Coffee?" "Always," Trent said. "Black. Keep it coming. Same for him." She poured 2 mugs, set them down, and placed menus on the table. "Breakfast is on the left. Specials are—" "Big Harbor breakfast," Trent interrupted. "Extra potatoes, extra bacon. Real extra this time, not diet extra." Riley's pen moved. Big Harbor, extra sides. And for you? Veggie omelet and toast, please, the colleague said. Got it, she replied. She clipped the ticket up for the cook and moved on. Eli focused on his plate. He had sat across from louder men in boardrooms, but there he'd had numbers and contracts as armor. Here he had a fake name, a worn coat, and a $4 breakfast. He took another bite. Trent's voice rose again, aimed small but thrown wide. You know what kills a place like this? He said. People who treat it like a lounge on a budget. His colleague sighed. Trent. No, look at that, Trent said, tilting his head toward Eli's booth. Prime spot, cheapest thing on the menu. No sides, no upgrades, just camp out on 2 eggs and a refill. If you can't afford breakfast, at least don't hog a booth. The nearby conversations thinned. A spoon stopped. A chair creaked and went still. Eli felt heat slide up his neck. He kept his eyes on the plate, but his hand tightened around the fork. He thought about replying, some sharp line from his other life. Nothing fit inside this coat. Mr. Walker. Riley's voice cut through the quiet. She stood between the 2 booths, coffee pot against her hip, shoulders squared. The tiredness was still under her eyes, but it no longer reached them. Trent looked up. Yeah? We don't talk about customers like that in here, she said. He blinked, then smiled as if she were joking. I'm just being honest. You want to keep the doors open, you can't have people paying the minimum and treating it like their office. That's not honesty, Riley replied. That's trying to embarrass someone who's done nothing to you. I'm a regular, Trent said. I bring people, I tip well. I think I've earned a little freedom. Everyone in here helps keep the lights on, Riley said. The crews, the old-timers, the guy with 2 eggs. If they walk in, order, and pay, they belong at whatever table I sat them at, same as you. At the counter, the man in the reflective jacket had turned halfway around. The older woman with tea watched openly now. Even Gus's hands had gone still. So, the waitress is running the rules now? Trent asked. I'm responsible for how people are treated while they're here, Riley answered. That's part of my job. You can complain about your food or your coffee. You don't get to turn another customer into a target. If that's a problem, you're free to take your business somewhere else. The line was clear. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Trent glanced around and finally seemed to see what had changed. The room's warmth wasn't gone, but it had stepped back from him. He exhaled. Fine, he muttered. Didn't know I'd signed up for a lecture with breakfast. Your food will be out soon, Riley said. Let me know if you need anything else. She turned, carried the coffee pot back toward the counter, and refilled the man in the cap's mug as if nothing unusual had happened. The café exhaled with her. Voices picked up again. The radio slid into the next song. A fork tapped against a plate. Eli looked at his eggs. The sting of Trent's words was still there, but something else sat beside it now. The solid, unfamiliar feeling of having been defended when he had nothing to offer in return. In his tower, people had stood up for him because his name could move deals. Here, he was just a tired man in a thrift store coat. Riley didn't know who he was or what he owned. She had stepped in because, to her, he was a customer, and that was enough. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, more for steadiness than warmth. If you sit at a table, you belong. She hadn't said those words, but he heard them anyway. They seemed to matter more than any line he'd ever signed on a contract. He took a slow breath, cut another piece of egg, and glanced toward the counter. Riley was listening to Gus with a small, tired smile, already moving on to the next task, the next person. To anyone walking in now, she was just a waitress doing her job. To Eli, she had just drawn the first crack in the glass between his life and everyone else's. And he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that this wasn't the last time he'd sit in that torn blue booth. By the third morning, Eli had a place in Harbor Light. Not a corner office, not a nameplate. Just the cracked blue booth by the back window, the one with stuffing peeking from the seat and a view of the counter and the flickering lighthouse sign. He pushed the door open, the bell chimed, and Gus barely had to look up. Same booth, Eli? Eli nodded. A minute later, Riley appeared with a chipped mug that had seen better decades. Black coffee, she said. Toast if you're feeling reckless. Just coffee, he answered. Reckless is above my pay grade this week. From that booth, the cafe slowly stopped being scenery and turned into a world that orbited around one overworked waitress. Late mornings, Mrs. Kwan arrived. She shuffled in with a reusable shopping bag and thick glasses that still weren't enough. Every time, she sat in the same seat near the window and frowned up at the specials board like it was written in another language. "Morning, Mrs. K," Riley called, already on her way. "Want me to be your glasses again?" "My eye's lazy today," the older woman sighed. "You tell me what is good. Doctor says no salt, no fun." Riley leaned on the table, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Okay, here are your choices," she said. "Option 1, gentle vegetable soup, your doctor's favorite. Option 2, grilled fish with lemon, tastes like you escaped town for the weekend. Option 3, pancakes that officially do not exist if any doctor asks." A small laugh escaped Mrs. Kwan. "You make everything sound nice," she said. "I take soup. Maybe next time we do crime." "Soup today, crime tomorrow," Riley said. "Coming right up." Eli watched from his corner, the exchange reflected faintly in the window beside him. To his boardroom mind, a menu had always been price points and margins. In Riley's hands, it was permission for an old woman to still feel like she had choices. Another day, the bell over the door announced trouble. A young mom wrestled a stroller through the entrance, hair thrown up in a knot, eyes so tired they looked bruised. Her toddler was already mid-meltdown, red-faced, heels thudding against the tray. "I'm so sorry," she blurted. "If he's bothering people, we can just go." "You're okay," Riley said, stepping in before the apologies drowned her. "Trust me, the coffee machine has yelled louder than he ever will." The kid proved her wrong with one piercing scream. Heads turned. The mom's shoulders collapsed inward. "Give me 1 minute," Riley said quietly. She slipped behind the counter, grabbed a small plastic cup, poured in a splash of soda, dropped a single bright cherry to the bottom, added a straw, and came back. She crouched so she was eye level with the boy. "Hey," she said, "see this? It's a secret power drink. The powers only work if you drink it super quietly. Loud sips scare them away." The boy hiccuped, curiosity cutting through the storm. "Powers? Big ones," she said, "but not for screamers." He grabbed the cup with both hands and focused on the straw. The crying cut off like someone turned a dial. The room's tension went with it. The mother let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like a sob of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I just needed 10 minutes where he wasn't exploding." "You've got them," Riley said. "Take your time with the menu." She moved on, clearing plates, refilling coffee like nothing unusual had happened. From his booth, Eli could feel the whole cafe breathe easier because one woman decided to meet panic with creativity instead of annoyance. In the slower hours, when the crowd thinned and the radio was louder than the customers, another side of Riley appeared. She took a spot at the end of the counter, flipped open a thick, battered textbook, and pulled out a notebook already filled with cramped handwriting. Eli squinted at the cover when she set it down. Community Development Finance. He'd seen that phrase on slide decks and proposals. He'd never seen it next to a jar of sugar packets in a tip cup. Riley read with a highlighter in one hand and pen in the other, filling margins with arrows and notes. Every few pages she rolled her shoulders, exhaled, then bent over the book again, like someone training a muscle that didn't know how tired it was allowed to be. Gus passed and tapped the edge of the textbook with a knuckle. "You know you're allowed to sit without studying, right?" he said. "If I sit without studying, I just worry in HD," she replied, eyes still on the page. "At least this way, I learn the language of the people who send you those fun letters with 6 zeros. He shook his head, but there was pride in his sigh. "Place would fall apart without you," he said. "Place is why I'm reading," she answered simply. That night, the rain blew straight in off the bay, slanting across the windows like gray ropes. The last customer left. Gus flipped the sign to closed and lifted chairs onto tables. Eli stayed in his booth, stretching his coffee as long as he could. "I'll lock the back," Riley said, shrugging into a thin jacket. "Don't swim home," Gus called after her. "If you drown, I'm doing your homework." The rear door thudded shut. A moment later, Eli heard her voice drift in through the slightly open side window near his booth. "Hi, this is Riley Harper, calling about John Harper's account," she said. The warmth he knew was gone from her tone, replaced with something flat and careful. "Yes, my father. I got the notice about the dialysis balance." Rain hammered the alley so hard it sounded like static. "I understand the minimum due," she said after a pause. "If I pay that, We don't pay rent. He can't miss treatment. I'm asking if there's any help for families who are short but paying what they can." Another pause. Eli could almost hear the silence on the other end. "I'm working double shifts," she added softly. "I'm taking night classes. I'm not asking you to erase it. I'm just asking for a little room to breathe." The answer, whatever it was short. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll figure something out. Thank you for your time." There was a scrape, like her back resting against the brick wall. "And about my brother's tuition," she said. "If he drops this semester, he loses his scholarship. He's the first one of us to get that far. I can push my classes. I just don't want him to lose his chance." Another silence, then a very small, "I understand," and the faint click of the call ending. For a few seconds, all Eli heard was rain. Then her voice again, this time meant for no one but herself. "Okay, Riley," she breathed. "One bill at a time. You've done worse weeks." When she came back through the rear door, her eyes were slightly red, but her expression had already slid back into place. She tied the apron around her waist again, like a shield, and walked toward the front. She noticed Eli still there. "Sorry," she said. "Didn't mean to vanish. Want a refill before we shut down?" He looked up at her, really seeing her now, the textbook ink still on her fingers, the weight of a sick father and a brother's tuition hanging behind her tired smile. "I'm good," he said quietly. "You've already done more than enough today." She frowned a little at that, then gave a small nod and went to help Gus stack chairs. Eli stared at the empty mug in front of him. On paper, this week was supposed to test whether he could survive on $300 and a flimsy jacket. From this booth, it was testing something entirely different. How long he could keep pretending the lives underneath his company's projects were just numbers on a screen. He didn't know yet what he would do with what he was learning. He only knew that tomorrow he would be back in the same booth, ordering the same cheap coffee, watching the same waitress hold together a world no balance sheet had ever bothered to measure. By closing time, Harbor Light was almost empty. The harbor outside was black glass. The radio murmured in the corner, and Eli sat in his usual booth with a mug that had gone cold, stretching out the last minutes in a place that still felt like it wanted him there. Gus stood at the register, counting the till in small, tense stacks. Riley moved through the room, wiping tables, resetting salt shakers, doing the 100 small rituals that said, without words, "We'll be here again tomorrow." Then the wall phone rang. The old beige landline hardly ever rang in the evenings. Its heavy bell made all three of them look up. Gus grabbed it. "Harbor Light Café, this is Gus." Eli couldn't hear the caller, only the way Gus's shoulders stiffened. "Yes, this is Gustavo Morales," Gus said. "Yeah, I'm the owner." There was a pause. The fingers of his free hand tapped once on the counter, then stilled. "We sent the renewal forms," he said. "We've never missed a payment." Another pause. 60,000? Gus repeated. "All at once?" Riley stopped mid-wipe. The rag dripped onto the floor. 45 days, Gus said slowly. "Sir, that's not realistic. This is a cafe, not a hedge fund." Silence on the line. The only sounds were the clock and the neon lighthouse buzzing outside. "Understood," he said at last. "Policy, not personal." "Right." He hung up and kept his hand on the phone a beat longer, like the news might change if he waited. "Riles," he called, voice rough. "Back here a minute?" She slipped through the swinging kitchen door. Eli slid out of his booth and wandered closer, stopping just shy of the opening. From there he could see the edge of a stainless counter and both of their reflections in it. "The bank," Gus said. "They denied the extension. They're calling the loan." "How much?" Riley asked. 60,000, he replied. "Due in 45 days. Or they take the building." For a second, nothing moved. "That's the whole note," she said quietly. "We don't have 60,000. We barely have 6. Property tax tripled too," Gus added. "New assessment because of that Harbor Vista project. Suddenly this block is prime. The guy at the bank hinted there's already an investor waiting. They'd rather see us default than renew. The land's worth more to them than the people in it." Riley folded her arms, eyes on the floor. When she looked up, they were tired but sharp. "So they raise costs until you're drowning," she said. "Then act surprised when you go under, and somebody with a shiny brochure happens to be standing by with a pen." "Pretty much," Gus said. She was quiet for a moment, then shook her head as if refusing a script someone else had written for her. "What do we bring in on a really good month?" she asked. "Full weekends, no broken fryer, tips decent." 6-7 grand, Gus said, "on a miracle run." "So we can't out-earn it," she said. "Fine. Then we don't let it happen quietly." He frowned. "Meaning?" "We turn Harbor Light into a story, not just a file," Riley replied. "Fundraiser night. Music if we can find some. Donation jars on every table. Save Harbor Light plastered everywhere. We call the local paper, that blog that loves hidden gems, the community radio. We set up a donation page. We let people see what they're about to lose." "You can't raise 60,000 with raffles and pancakes," Gus said gently. "Maybe not," she said, "but doing nothing guarantees we lose. At least this way, they have to look us in the eye before they sign the papers. And we're not the only ones. If the bar, the laundromat, the repair shop got the same treatment, we stand together. A whole block is harder to ignore than one tired owner in a suit he can't afford." He studied her, pride and exhaustion mixed. She looked as worn as the booths and just as stubborn. "I don't know if it'll change anything," he admitted. "Me neither," she answered, "but I know what happens if we don't try." After a long breath, he nodded. "Okay, you take the fundraiser and the online stuff. I'll talk to the neighbors. We'll see who else is on the hook." "Deal," Riley said. "Guess I'll be spending the night with a notebook instead of a pillow." She pushed back into the dining room. Her eyes were red at the edges, but her chin was lifted. "Closing time, Eli," she said when she saw him. "We've got a whole harbor to fight with one little cafe." He stood and left a few crumpled bills on the table. "Thanks," he said simply, "for the coffee." Outside, the harbor wind sliced through his thin jacket. Harbor Light's neon lighthouse flickered, throwing a weak blue halo onto the wet sidewalk. From halfway down the street, the cafe looked very small, a square of light in a row of dark windows. Back in his hostel room, the air was damp and sour. The mattress sagged in the middle. Eli sat, pulled a second-hand laptop from under the bed, and opened it on his knees. The casing was cracked, but the screen came alive. The hostel's Wi-Fi took its time, then loaded a blank browser. He stared at the login page he knew by heart. Cole Horizon's internal portal. The deal with Victor had been clear. 10 days with no help, no accounts, no cars. "Live like them," Victor had joked. But Harbor Light wasn't a case study. 60,045 days weren't numbers on a slide. They were Gus, Riley, the regulars whose names he now knew. He typed his real username and password. The dashboard loaded, clean lists of projects, charts, maps. The sanitized version of the city he'd been staring at from 30 floors up. He typed 2 words into the search bar, Harbor Vista. A project file opened. Cole Horizons, Harbor Vista, Mixed-Use Development, the header read. A satellite image of the waterfront filled the screen. One block, Harbor Lights block, was outlined in heavy red. Redevelopment zone, priority. He zoomed in. Each building had a tag. Next to the cafe's address, status, target, expedite. Below it, a paragraph. Existing legacy businesses not critical to long-term plan. Recommend firm stance on loan renewals and use of updated property tax assessments to encourage turnover. Investor Consortium has expressed strong interest in full block acquisition. At the bottom, in crisp type, Executive Sponsor, Victor Lang, Strategic Priority. The same man who had teased Nathan about being too soft for real life was officially in charge of wiping out the street where that real life played out. Eli stared at the screen. In the boardroom, this had been a clean opportunity. Strong returns, sleek towers, phrases like activating underutilized assets. From the hostel bed, he saw it differently. Inside the red outline lived Gus's shaking hands, Riley's fundraiser plans, Mrs. Kwan's quiet bowl of soup. The company logo in the corner looked less like a brand and more like a footprint. He closed the laptop halfway, then opened it again. The words stayed the same. Nathan Cole had stepped out of the glass tower to taste ordinary life for 10 days. Sitting in a moldy room with diner coffee still on his clothes, he finally understood the part he'd never put into any memo. He wasn't just another man hiding in a torn jacket at Harbor Light. He was the storm his own company had sent toward it. 3 days after the bank's call, Harbor Light looked the same. The neon lighthouse still flickered. The booths were still cracked. The smell of coffee and grease still wrapped around anyone who pushed through the door. But inside, the air felt thinner, like the room was quietly bracing for impact. Eli took his usual booth and watched. Gus moved with a stiffness that hadn't been there before. Riley worked faster, but her little jokes didn't land. Nobody lingered over refills. Late morning, the bell over the door chimed and the whole cafe seemed to flinch. A man in a navy suit stepped in, and every chipped surface in the place made his clothes look shinier. He was mid-30s, well-groomed, with a leather portfolio and a smile that looked rehearsed. "Good morning," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "Who's the owner here?" Gus stepped away from the register, wiping his hands on a towel. "That'd be me," he said. "Gus Morales." The man came straight to the counter. "Marcus Hale," he said, placing a card down. "North Shore Capital Partners. We're working with your bank and Harbor Vista Development on this corridor." Riley, refilling sugar caddies, paused. Eli felt his jaw tighten. He had seen that fund's name in the Harbor Vista files. Marcus opened his portfolio. "I'll be brief," he said. "As of this morning, our fund has purchased your loan. We're your lender now." Gus frowned. "I thought we owed the bank." "You did," Marcus replied. "They sold the note to us. It's efficient. They get liquidity, we get flexibility." "Flexibility like the extension we asked for?" Gus asked. Marcus gave a sympathetic half smile. "Different kind," he said. "We're repositioning this block. We need clear outcomes, not open questions. So, here are your options." He held up one finger. "Option 1, you pay off the full balance, $60,000 plus fees, within 72 hours. He held up a second finger. "Option 2, you sign a transfer of ownership today. We forgive the debt and give you a relocation payment of $7,500. Gus stared. 72 hours, he said. "The bank said 45 days, and you think $7,000 replaces 30 years of this place?" "Your equipment is outdated," Marcus said calmly. "The building needs work. The value is the land. This corner is prime. Right now it's quaint. On our plan, it's a stain that needs to be cleaned up." Riley set the scoop down. "A stain," she repeated. "You mean the cafe that stayed when this street was empty?" Marcus turned to her. "And you are?" he asked. "Someone who actually lives here," she said. "You see land. I see Mrs. Kwan in that booth so she doesn't need a loan. I see dock workers here at dawn because this is the only place that lets them pay on payday. I see kids doing homework over fries because home doesn't have a table big enough." "I don't doubt there are touching stories," Marcus said. "But feelings don't pay loans. Emotions don't go in quarterly reports." "Maybe they should," she shot back. "You don't bulldoze a spreadsheet. You bulldoze the only warm room some people have." Gus raised a hand. "Riles," he said quietly. "Let him finish." Marcus slid 2 sets of papers across the counter. "If you bring the money in 3 days, we're done," he said. "If you sign today, you walk away with a check instead of a foreclosure notice. If you do neither, we'll move forward legally. Sheriff, locks, auctions. I'd rather not." Gus's fingers hovered above the signature line. "What would you do if this was your name above the door?" he asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "In your position, I'd take the relocation package and start somewhere that fits the future," he said. He shut the portfolio. "I'll be back in 72 hours, he said, "either to accept your payment or your signature. Either way, this block is changing." He gave the room one last quick look without really meeting anyone's eyes. "Enjoy the memories while they're still here," he added. The bell jingled as he left. The sound felt sharp. Gus sank onto a stool. "I'm tired," he admitted. "I don't know if I can fight a fund with a diner." Riley stepped closer, hands flat on the counter. "Then let us fight," she said. "Me, the regulars, the neighbors. Their betting will just fold. We can't stop them from swinging, but we can stop handing them the bat." In his booth, Eli felt the corporate language he knew so well crack apart. From the tower, people like Marcus said unlocking value and optimizing assets. Standing here, it looked like a robbery carried out in slow motion with glossy paper and polite threats. That weekend, Harbor Light tried something new. It fought back with lights and small bills. Twinkle lights were taped along the ceiling. Old photos covered a corkboard near the door. Gus younger, kids in team jerseys, families squeezed into booths. A hand-painted sign read, in shaky letters, "Save Harbor Light." Riley stood near the counter, holding an ancient microphone that hummed. "If this place has ever held you together on a bad morning," she said, "tonight's your turn to hold it up." A local band squeezed into the corner. They played songs everyone knew, and a few about docks and rain and stubborn hope. Kids danced between tables. Someone passed around cupcakes with uneven icing. A big glass jar on the counter had a label taped to it. Fight Fund. Mrs. Kwan shuffled up and slid in a folded bill. The dock workers came straight from shift, boots leaving marks on the floor, dropping ones and fives. The young mom with the toddler pushed a 10 into the jar and mouthed thank you to Riley. A reporter from the neighborhood paper took pictures of the sign, the crowd, the jar filling slowly. He wrote in a small notebook, probably for a story most people would scroll past in seconds. Eli moved through the room, clearing tables, carrying extra chairs. When no one watched, he folded a few 20s into his hand and pushed them deep into the jar under everyone else's crumpled money. Later, the music faded. The crowd thinned. Hugs were exchanged at the door. People promised to come back no matter what, and stepped into the cold. In the back, under buzzing fluorescent light, Riley poured the contents of the jar onto a metal table. Bills spread out. Coins rolled to the edges. A couple of checks lay on top with shaky notes on the memo lines. They counted together. 300, 450, Riley murmured. 600, 640. When they finished, the total sat in small, neat stacks. It was a beautiful amount for one night in a small café. It was also a fraction of 60,000. Riley stared at the money. "It's a start," Gus said quietly. "More than I ever thought we'd see." "It's not enough," she whispered. She drew in a breath, straightened, and forced a tired smile. "Tomorrow we open like always," she said. "Coffee at 5, grill at 6. We stay open until they make us stop." Eli looked at her, at Gus, at the money, at the empty jar. For the first time, the deadline on Harbor Light didn't feel like a line in a report. It felt like a line he was about to cross or refuse, with the rest of his life attached to it. The next day, Harbor Light was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. The machines hissed, plates tapped the counter, the neon lighthouse buzzed, but the usual chatter was gone. People ordered, ate, and left quickly, as if they didn't want to watch something sink. Gus moved slowly behind the counter. He checked the till, checked the clock, checked the hand-painted Save Harbor Light sign. The donation jar beneath it held small bills and coins, folded tight. Riley kept the floor running. She refilled mugs, carried plates, and called out orders with her usual steady voice. Only her eyes betrayed her, ringed with red at the edges. Eli sat in his corner booth with a mug he barely tasted. The image from his laptop wouldn't leave his mind. A map, this block outlined in red. The words, Priority Zone. Victor's name on the plan, his company's logo in the corner. On paper, Harbor Light was a line item. In here, it was people trying not to count days. The bell over the door chimed. Trent Walker walked in, bringing cold air and a voice a little too loud for the room. Same shiny suit, same oversized watch. His jaw was clenched, phone clamped in one hand. He dropped into his usual booth and threw the phone onto the table. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. "They gave the contract to Westside?" Riley came over with the coffee pot. "Morning," she said. "Coffee?" "Yeah," he snapped. "Might as well get something out of this day." She poured and moved to turn away. His gaze caught the sign in the jar. He smirked. "Gus," he called. "What's with the jar? New special? Donate so we can ignore math?" Conversations faded. Mrs. Kwan's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "We had a fundraiser," Gus replied. "People wanted to help. We left it out." "Help you do what?" Trent said. "Delay the inevitable, streets change, old spots vanish, and the bank doesn't take feelings as payment." Riley set the pot down and walked back. "If you'd like to order, I can take it," she said. "If you just want to make jokes, lower your voice or take them outside." He leaned back. "Relax," he said. "Big breakfast, extra bacon. I can still afford real food." His eyes slid to the corner. "And you," he added louder, "still here, huh? Same booth, same bargain coffee. Whole place falling apart, and you're clinging to that mug like it's going to change something." Eli stared at the table. "Trent," Riley warned, "that's enough." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," he said. Places don't close because of one banker. They close because half the people inside treat them like a rescue shelter instead of a business. Nobody laughed. Something in Riley finally snapped. She stepped up to his table. "Get up," she said. He blinked. "What?" "Get up," she repeated. "You're done here." Trent laughed once. "I'm a paying customer," he said. "You don't get to decide when I'm done." "We do," Riley replied. "This is our café. We decide who we serve. You don't get to walk in here, insult the people at our tables, and expect a refill." She walked to the door, flipped the lock, and opened it. Cold air flooded in. "You are no longer welcome at Harbor Light," she said. "Not today, not next week. We'd rather lose a customer than keep someone who enjoys kicking people when they're down." Trent stayed seated. "So that's the plan?" he scoffed. "Kick out the people who still have money? Smart. Maybe gratitude and memories can cover 60 grand. Gus stepped out from behind the counter, hand on the phone. "She's right," he said. "We don't have a lot left, but we still have a choice. If you walk out now, it's just an argument. If you stay, I call the police and explain you're disrupting what's left of my business." Trent looked around, waiting for someone to back him up. No one did. He grabbed his coat. "This place is a joke," he muttered. "You'll be gone in a month." "Maybe," Riley said, "but we won't spend that month applauding you." He pushed past her and stepped outside. The bell over the door rang too brightly as it swung shut. Riley closed it, turned the lock, and flipped the sign to closed, even though the afternoon rush hadn't started. Then she slid down the glass until she was sitting on the floor, knees drawn up, hands covering her face. "I think I just threw out one of the only regulars we had left," she said, voice thin. Gus set the phone down and lowered himself beside her. "If that's the price of keeping your self-respect," he said quietly, "I'll pay it. We're losing enough already. We don't have to lose that too." Riley let out a breath that shook. "If they take this place," she whispered, "I want to know we went out as ourselves, not as people who smiled and served extra bacon while someone stomped on us." From his booth, Eli watched them on the floor by the locked door. They were about to lose their building and their income. They refused to sell the one thing no bank could seize. The 10-day experiment Victor had pitched sounded clever in the boardroom. Down here, it felt cruel. He had walked into these lives as if they were a case study. They were fighting for a home. Nathan stood up. He looked at the donation jar, at the regulars pretending not to stare, at Riley and Gus bracing themselves on a floor that might soon belong to someone else. He had seen enough breakfasts, enough quiet kindness, enough tired courage. On his way to the door, he paused. "Thank you," he said softly. Riley dropped her hands, surprised. "For what?" "For not letting him win," Nathan said. "For reminding me there are things worth losing money for." She studied him, then nodded once. "We look out for the people who sit at these tables," she said, "at least until someone takes the tables away." Nathan stepped into the cold harbor air. This time, he didn't turn toward the hostel. He walked toward the side street where a black sedan had been idling all week, unseen by everyone but him. It was time to stop pretending he was just Eli. The next time he walked through Harbor Light's door, it would be with the one thing Riley and Gus didn't have, the power to draw a line through that red box on the map. By the next morning, Harbor Light felt like a place waiting for a sentence. The grill hissed, the coffee machine rattled, the neon lighthouse still flickered in the window, but the door stayed locked. The closed sign faced the harbor, though it was already mid-morning. Gus stood at the counter with the bank envelope and a pen he hadn't uncapped. Riley wiped the same patch of Formica until it squeaked. "You don't have to be here for this," Gus said. "I can deal with him." Riley shook her head. "If someone's going to tell us we're finished, they can say it with both of us standing there," she replied. "Not with you alone turning off the lights." A firm knock hit the glass. Gus sighed, flipped the lock, and opened the door. Marcus Hale walked in like a man on schedule, not a man at a funeral. Same immaculate suit, same polished shoes, portfolio under his arm. He gave the empty room a quick scan and smiled as if it confirmed a prediction. "Morning," he said. "I see you've cleared the tables. That makes this easier." He set his folder down and, in a few smooth sentences, laid out the options. If Gus refused to sign, there would be foreclosure, court, eventually a sheriff at the door. If he signed now, the debt would be forgiven, and there'd be a check for $10,000 to help you relocate. 10,000? Gus repeated. This building is my whole life. This corner is worth far more than your grill and mugs, Marcus replied. On our map, this place is a tiny stain on a very clean new waterfront. We're just cleaning the map. Riley's hand tightened on the rag. On your map, she said quietly. This is a stain. On ours, it's where Mrs. Kwan eats soup she can afford, where dock workers warm up at 5 in the morning, where my brother did homework when our heat got cut. You don't see that in your spreadsheets, but it's real. Stories don't change cash flow, Marcus answered with a patient shrug. Cities evolve. I'm offering you the soft landing instead of the hard one. The bell over the door chimed again. The man who stepped in this time did not look like he'd ever ordered the dock worker special. Navy suit, perfectly cut. Shoes that had never seen dishwater. Behind him came a broad-shouldered man in a darker suit and a woman with a slim briefcase. Riley looked at the man in navy and felt the room tilt. The thrift store jacket was gone, the stubble shaved, the hair neat. But the eyes were exactly the same. Eli? She whispered. He gave a small nod. Not exactly, he said. My name is Nathan Cole. The name hung between the coffee machine and the neon lighthouse. Gus stared. Cole? As in Cole Horizons? He asked. Harbor Vista Cole? Yes, Nathan said. Cole Horizons is mine. Marcus straightened so fast his tie shifted. Mr. Cole, he said quickly. I was just finalizing the transfer. We're aligned with the plan. If Mr. Morales signs... Nathan didn't look at him. He walked up to the counter, to the place where he'd sat hunched in a torn booth all week. You've known me as Eli, he said to Gus and Riley. A man in a cheap jacket ordering your least expensive breakfast. What I didn't tell you is that I own the company trying to erase this cafe. For that, I owe you both an apology. So this was an experiment, Riley said, her voice low. You came down here to watch what it looks like when we lose everything. I came because someone told me I'd forgotten what the ground feels like, Nathan replied. I thought 10 days living like everyone else would give me something clever to say in a boardroom. Then I walked into Harbor Light and you brought me coffee like I mattered. He held out a hand toward Marcus without breaking eye contact with Riley. The papers, he said. Marcus hesitated. Sir, these are pending legal instruments. Our investors... The papers, Marcus, Nathan repeated. He didn't raise his voice, but the room heard the change. Marcus slid the folder across the counter. Nathan opened it, flipped to the first page of the foreclosure, and took a dark fountain pen from his jacket. He set the document flat where everyone could see. For a second, the only sound was the soft hiss of the coffee machine. Then Nathan wrote one word across the top, in slow, deliberate strokes. Void. The ink sliced through months of dread. Beneath it, he signed his name. Nathan Cole. He turned the paper around and pushed it toward Gus. This foreclosure is canceled, he said, effective immediately. Harbor Light's debt to our entity is forgiven. The building and this business remain yours. Gus's hand flew to his mouth. His shoulders sagged as if somebody had cut the rope he'd been hanging from. Forgiven? He whispered. You mean nobody's coming? Nobody from us, Nathan said. You'll get formal confirmation from our legal team. But as of now, no one is taking your keys. Riley stared at the ink, then at him. You could have walked away and let it happen, she said. You almost did. I almost did, Nathan admitted. Then I watched you throw out a man who thought his money gave him the right to humiliate people, even when you were days from losing everything. I watched your regulars fill that jar with bills they couldn't spare. I realized that little red box on my map was full of lives, not numbers. Marcus cleared his throat. Sir, with respect, he said, this is reckless. We have investors and partners tied into this corridor. You can't just rip up a foreclosure because a waitress makes a speech. Nathan glanced at the man behind him. Jordan, he said, read me Marcus's last memo about this street. Jordan checked his phone and read, voice flat. Legacy shops that add visual noise but minimal revenue, he recited. Dead weight on a high-potential shoreline, a stain on the harbor map. Gus flinched. Riley's fingers dug into the counter. Nathan turned back to Marcus. When you sit in a glass office and call people's lives dead weight and stains, he said quietly, you forget they can hear you when you come downstairs. I was following the directive, Marcus protested. Acquire at all costs, minimize overhead. That came from the executive team. Nothing in that directive told you to talk about communities like trash, Nathan replied. You chose those words, you chose that posture, and you wore my name while you did it. He nodded once to Jordan. Marcus Hale, Nathan said, your employment with Cole Horizons ends today, effective immediately. You no longer represent this company. Marcus stared. You're firing me here? He said, in a diner. In the diner you tried to erase, Nathan answered, in front of the people you treated as collateral damage. The woman with the briefcase lifted the portfolio from Marcus's hand. Jordan guided him toward the door. This is a mistake, Marcus muttered. You're throwing away profit for sentiment. No, Nathan said. I'm choosing what kind of profit is worth anything. The bell chimed softly as Marcus stepped outside into the gray. The cafe was silent again. Gus looked down at the page marked void and let out a long, shaking breath. Riley realized she was still holding the rag and set it on the counter. So, what now? She asked. Nathan looked around, at the worn booths, the old photos, the stubborn neon lighthouse. Now, he said, Harbor Light stays, and Harbor Vista doesn't happen the way it was drawn. We're done treating places like this as stains on a map instead of pieces of a community. That starts here. The bell above the door chimed again. Victor Lang stepped in, breathing hard, tie crooked, phone still in his hand. Nathan, he said, eyes on the void page, tell me you didn't just cancel a Harbor Vista foreclosure from behind a diner counter. Nathan didn't move. I did, he said. We're not taking Harbor Light. Victor came closer, lowering his voice. Harbor Vista is the backbone of our shoreline plan, he said. Lenders, contractors, analysts, all locked in. If you start ripping up deals because one cafe makes you feel something, the market will punish us. Stock drops, partners doubt us, and the board starts asking if you're stable enough to run this company. Riley's jaw tightened at one cafe. Gus stood behind the counter, fingers dug into the edge. Nathan's reply was steady. If a project only works when we crush the people living under it, he said, it's not a backbone, it's rot. Victor stared. They'll adjust, he said, waving a hand at the room. They always do. We're talking about thousands of jobs and long-term returns. You're letting one emotional moment wreck a 9-figure development. That isn't leadership. That's impulse. Nathan turned the paperwork so Victor could see the black word across the top. This moment is the first honest picture I've had of what Harbor Vista really does, he said. And I'm choosing based on that. He set the page back in front of Gus. Effective immediately, Nathan said, facing Victor. Harbor Vista is suspended. All acquisitions tied to it are frozen. The urban redevelopment unit that treated streets like this as clutter is dissolved. We're done playing that game. Gus let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Riley felt her shoulders drop for the first time in days. Victor's face drained. You're going to tell the board that? He asked. That their growth engine died in a greasy spoon? I'm going to tell them we stopped erasing the kind of neighborhoods that built this company, Nathan replied. If they hate that, at least we'll finally know what we're choosing. Near the door, Amelia moved closer. Then we should be clear about what we build instead, she said. Nathan nodded. Go on. We've spent years mapping blocks like this, Amelia said. We know exactly which places hold them together. Planners call them community anchors. The cafes, barbershops, corner stores, where people actually live their lives. When those go, the map looks cleaner. But the neighborhood doesn't. She glanced at the old photos, at Gus, at the donation jar. Right now, she continued, our playbook treats anchors as obstacles. We tighten loans, wait for them to choke, buy the land, build glass, and call it progress. If we're serious about changing, we could flip it. Take the capital set aside for Harbor Vista and build a division that defends anchors instead of targeting them. Nathan's eyes narrowed. What does that division do? He asked. Step in before places like this get strangled, Amelia said. Offer fair loans, translate contracts. Send lawyers to stand beside owners when someone like Marcus shows up with a deadline and a smile. Help them modernize enough to survive without losing what makes them home. Call it the Community Anchor Initiative. Put it in writing that Cole Horizon stands with the people who keep lights like that one on. She nodded toward the flickering lighthouse sign. The name seemed to settle into the air. Community Anchor Initiative, Nathan repeated. A division whose job is making sure the next harbor light doesn't stare down a $60,000 wall alone. Victor shook his head. You're turning us into a rescue service, he said. We're a corporation, not a charity. That money was supposed to build towers, not patch booths. This isn't charity, Nathan said. It's finally paying attention to what we stand on. Healthy communities aren't free. Either we invest in them, or we help tear them apart. I'm done choosing the second. Then he turned to Riley. For 10 days, he said, I've watched you manage more out of this cafe than some executives manage out of entire floors. She blinked, startled. I've seen you calm customers, defend them, keep this place moving when everything around it was falling apart, Nathan said. You ran a fundraiser on fumes, you held the line with Trent, and in the tiny spaces between all of that, you were hunched over a community finance textbook, teaching yourself the language people like me use in memos. Color rose in Riley's cheeks. A tear slid down. She brushed it away quickly. What are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I want you to run the Community Anchor Initiative, Nathan replied. To be its first director, not as decoration, as the person who decides which neighborhoods we stand up for and how. He didn't look away. We'll pay you a real salary, he said. We'll pay for you to finish your degree, tuition, books, everything. And there's one more piece. I've heard enough of your calls to know that your father's treatment is a mountain you've been climbing while carrying plates. From the day you sign, his medical costs become the initiative's first official case. We'll take them on, not as a favor, as an investment in the leader I trust with this work. Riley let out a small, stunned laugh. People like me don't get offers like that, she whispered. Gus shook his head, eyes wet. Kid, he said, if you turn this down, I'm charging you double for coffee forever. That pulled a shaky smile from her. She looked at Gus, at the lighthouse in the window, at the word void on the counter, then back at Nathan. If I say yes, she said slowly, I need your promise this doesn't become another pretty paragraph in a shareholder letter. If we say we're helping places like this, we really help them. Nathan held her gaze. You'll have the authority to make sure of that, he said, and permission to call me out if we ever forget. Riley took one long breath. Then yes, she said. I'll do it. Nathan's hand closed around hers. Welcome to Coal Horizons, Director Price, he said. For the first time in a long while, the little lighthouse in the window didn't look like a relic. It looked like what it had always tried to be, a signal that someone still had a place to come home to. By early spring, Harbor Light no longer looked like a place waiting to disappear. The booths were still blue, but the vinyl was new, the floor was clean instead of tired, and above the door, a fresh lighthouse neon burned steady against the harbor sky. Near the entrance hung a frame. In the photo, Gus stood in front of the cafe with one arm around Riley in a plain blazer. The headline read, Coal Horizons Fund helps harbor businesses stay afloat. And around it, smaller pictures showed familiar faces. Mrs. Kwan, the dock workers, kids with birthday candles. Riley pushed the door open with her shoulder, laptop bag bumping her hip. No apron, no order pad, just a badge on her blazer. Riley Price, Director, Community Anchor Initiative. For a moment she stood still, listening to the clink of plates and low voices. Look who still remembers the little people, Gus called from behind the counter. I live 3 blocks away, Riley said, sliding onto a stool. Gus poured her coffee. Yeah, but now you walk in with a briefcase, he said. That's new. She cupped the mug and took in the room. Months ago, the same sounds had felt like a countdown. Now they sounded like a place that was sure it would open again tomorrow. How's the anchor run? Gus asked. Busy, Riley replied. Today it's Manny's auto shop and a stubborn little bookstore by the ferry, both on the edge, both worth saving. Tell Manny he still owes me for that cracked windshield, Gus muttered. Use your title. I'll put it in the fine print, she said. We move quickly through her day. In Manny's cramped office, Riley spreads a lease across a scarred desk and quietly pushes him towards clauses that cap rent and block surprise demolition. At the bookstore, she sits beside the owner and helps her call the bank, turning a crushing payment plan into something the shelves might actually survive. It isn't glamorous, it's math, phone calls, and staying in the room until shoulders drop and breathing slows. The same finance pages she once read alone on break are now keeping other people's doors open. By late afternoon, the lighthouse sign over Harbor Light glows against early dusk. Inside, the rush has thinned to a couple of ferry workers and a teenager doing homework in the corner where Eli once tried to disappear. Riley takes her old booth, opens her laptop, and pulls up the initiative dashboard. Names fill the screen: Manny's Auto, Harbor Page Books. A laundromat, a family cafe 3 neighborhoods over. Each has a mark beside it: green for secured, yellow for still fighting. At the top sits Harbor Light, solid green. A new email drops into her inbox from Nathan Cole. Subject: Summit Office. Final. She opens it. Legal has finished their review. The supply contract with Summit Office Supply, Trent's company, has been terminated for conduct inconsistent with Cole Horizon's values and community standards. The contract will be rebid under stricter rules. Summit has already been notified. Under the formal paragraphs sits one line: "Thought you'd want to see where his story landed." Riley hears Trent's voice in her memory, mocking their donation jar, calling Eli a leech over a cheap breakfast. Back then he acted as if this room was too small for his words to matter. Now those words have followed him into the only language he respected: a contract lost. "Sometimes the bill really does arrive," she murmurs. The bell over the door chimes. Nathan steps in, wearing dark jeans, worn boots, and a navy sweater. No entourage, no briefcase. A couple of regulars glance up, nod, and return to their plates. "You're late," Gus says. "Your corner table was thinking about moving on." "I'd hate to risk that," Nathan replies, crossing to Riley's booth. He slides into the seat across from her and nods toward the laptop. "How does it look?" he asks. "From down here, not from the tower." She turns the screen. "Manny's safe," she says. "The bookstore has breathing room. The laundromat landlord is still pretending we can't read, but he'll get tired before we do." Nathan studies the cluster of green and yellow dots. "This," he says quietly, "is what I wanted. Not one big headline, a different habit." "Habits are just choices you repeat," Riley answers. "You decided not to be the man who lets places like this drown. I'm just writing that into the paperwork." Gus appears with his notepad. "So," he asks, "you two planning to live off good intentions, or can I write down something that pays for coffee?" Riley lifts her mug. "I'm good." Nathan glances at the chalkboard, but already knows. "I'll have the dock worker special," he says. 2 eggs, potatoes, black coffee." Gus snorts. Could buy the pier and still orders the cheapest plate. Some things really don't change. When Gus walks away, a quiet settles between them. Outside, cranes move slowly above the water. Inside, the lighthouse neon paints a soft glow across the same tabletop, where a man in a torn jacket once tried not to be seen. "Do you miss it?" Riley asks. "The distance, the clean charts." "Sometimes," Nathan admits. "Up there, a neighborhood is a line and a percentage. Down here, every line has a face, a rent bill, a favorite booth." Gus returns and sets the plate and mug down. The same simple meal Eli once stretched over an entire morning now sits between them in a cafe that no longer has its back to the wall. Nathan wraps his hands around the coffee. He takes a sip, then meets Riley's eyes. "There was a moment," he says, "when you opened that door and told Trent to leave. You thought you were just protecting a tired cafe. You had no idea who was listening." "I wasn't thinking about who was listening," she replies. "I was thinking we weren't trash, and I was done letting someone act like we were." "That was enough," he says. "It changed everything." In the end, the story of Harbor Light isn't really about a billionaire in a thrift store coat. It's about a young woman who chose dignity when it cost her, an owner who said no when signing would have been easier, and a man with more money than sense who finally decided that the point of power is not how hard you can press someone down, but how many you can help stand. Wealth built the glass tower, character opened its doors, and in a small cafe by the water, with new booths, a steady lighthouse sign, and a simple plate of eggs cooling between 2 people, the circle closes quietly. Hunger turns into enough, fear into security, and one distant fortune into a living anchor for the streets it almost erased.